What if I told you that woolly mammoths were still alive in the year 2000 BC? That's right. While the Egyptians were building the pyramids, while ancient civilizations were developing writing systems, these massive Ice Age creatures were still walking the earth. Don't laugh. Don't dismiss this, because today we're going to prove it using science's own evidence. Evidence that's been hidden in plain sight for decades. This isn't a theory. This isn't speculation. This is documented scientific fact that mainstream education has systematically downplayed. And by the end of this investigation, you'll understand exactly why they don't want you asking questions about the timeline of extinction. The truth is far stranger and far more unsettling than anything you learned in school. Our investigation begins in one of the most remote places on Earth, Wrangel Island. This desolate Arctic island sits in the freezing waters between Russia and Alaska, a place so isolated that even experienced explorers struggled to reach it for centuries. It's here, on this frozen wasteland, that scientists made one of the most shocking discoveries in paleontology. They found mammoth bones, lots of them. But these weren't the ancient fossils you might expect. When they carbon dated these remains, the result sent shockwaves through the scientific community. The bones were only 4,000 years old. To put that in perspective, these mammoths died around the same time that Stonehenge was being built, when the Bronze Age was in full swing across Europe and Asia. The textbooks tell us mammoths vanished 10,000 years ago, victims of climate change at the end of the Ice Age. But the evidence on Wrangel Island tells a completely different story.
Think about that for a moment. While your ancestors were developing agriculture, building cities, and creating written language, woolly mammoths, those supposedly extinct Ice Age giants, were still alive. They were breathing, eating, reproducing, and surviving on this remote island. The implications are staggering. It means everything we've been taught about the timeline of extinction is fundamentally flawed. But here's where it gets even stranger. These mammoths didn't gradually die out. They didn't slowly fade away over thousands of years. According to the fossil record, they disappeared suddenly, almost overnight. One moment, there's a thriving population. The next moment, silence. Complete extinction. No warning signs, no evidence of a gradual decline. They simply vanished from existence. How is that possible? What could cause an entire species to disappear so abruptly after surviving for 6,000 years on that island? The official explanation doesn't hold up to scrutiny, and that's what we're here to investigate. Let's start with what we're told happened. The official narrative goes like this. About 10,000 years ago, as the last ice age ended, rising sea levels cut Wrangel Island off from mainland Siberia. A small population of mammoths, perhaps just 8 individuals according to genetic analysis, found themselves trapped on this island. But rather than dying out, they thrived. The population grew to several hundred individuals and remained stable for 6 millennia. Scientists tell us these island mammoths were smaller than their mainland cousins, adapted to island life, and relatively healthy, despite genetic evidence of inbreeding. Everything seemed fine. The mammoths had food, water, and no natural predators. It was, by all accounts, a mammoth paradise. Then, around 2000 BC, something happened. The fossil record shows their numbers dropping to 0 in what appears to be an instant. Mainstream science attributes this to a random catastrophic event, perhaps extreme weather, maybe a disease outbreak, possibly even human hunters. But none of these explanations are satisfying when you dig deeper into the evidence.
But we need to ask some uncomfortable questions. If these mammoths survived for 6,000 years in complete isolation, adapting successfully to their environment, why would they suddenly all die at once? Random catastrophes don't work that way. Even the most severe weather events leave survivors. Diseases typically kill the weak first, leaving resistant individuals to rebuild the population. And human hunters? The earliest evidence of human presence on Wrangel Island dates to 3,600 years ago, several centuries after the mammoths were already gone. So what really happened? Here's what doesn't make sense.
The isotope analysis of their bones shows no signs of starvation or nutritional stress. Their habitat wasn't deteriorating. Climate data from the period shows stable conditions. There's no evidence of volcanic activity, meteor impacts, or any other obvious catastrophe. Yet an entire population, hundreds of animals, vanished without a trace. It's as if they were erased from existence in a single moment. And that's where our investigation takes a darker turn.
To understand why the Wrangel Island extinction is bizarre, let's compare it to other mammoth populations. On St. Paul Island in Alaska, mammoths also survived until about 5,600 years ago. But scientists can clearly explain why they died. The island's fresh water sources dried up as the climate changed. The isotope evidence shows dramatic shifts in their diet and water consumption right before extinction. There's a clear cause and effect. Same with the Ukrainian mammoths that died out 15,000 years ago. We can see environmental changes reflected in their bones. But Wrangel Island? Nothing. No warning signs, no dietary shifts, no environmental stress markers. The mammoths were fine one day and gone the next. It's almost as if someone flipped a switch. And when you look at the broader pattern of megafauna extinction across the planet, you start to see something deeply disturbing. Everywhere humans went, large animals mysteriously vanished. But the timeline on Wrangel doesn't fit that pattern either. These mammoths outlived their mainland cousins by 6,000 years. They survived the supposed human hunting extinction that killed everything else. So what finally got them? Now let's talk mathematics, because this is where the official story completely falls apart. Genetic studies show the Wrangel mammoth population numbered between 200 and 300 individuals at any given time. For a large mammal species, that's actually a stable, viable population. Compare that to modern endangered species, many have far fewer individuals and still manage to survive with conservation efforts. Mammoths, with no human intervention, maintain this population for 6,000 years. The genetic diversity data shows they were slowly eliminating harmful mutations from their gene pool. They were getting healthier, not weaker. Population modeling based on their reproduction rates and lifespans indicates the population was stable right up until the end. There should have been survivors. There should have been stragglers. There should have been some population that made it through whatever event occurred. But there weren't. Every single mammoth died. The probability of a natural event killing 100% of a geographically dispersed population of this size is astronomically low. We're talking about a statistical impossibility, unless...
For years, scientists blamed genetics. They said the population was too inbred, too genetically weak to survive. But a 2024 study completely demolished that theory. Researchers analyzed 21 mammoth genomes spanning 50,000 years and found something shocking. Yes, the Wrangel mammoth showed signs of inbreeding. Yes, they had lower genetic diversity than their mainland ancestors, but the really harmful mutations were being purged from the population. Natural selection was working exactly as it should. The lead researcher stated, quote, "We can now confidently reject the idea that the population was simply too small and that they were doomed to go extinct for genetic reasons." Think about what that means. The excuse that's been used for decades, that these mammoths were genetic dead ends, has been scientifically disproven. They weren't dying from inbreeding. They weren't collapsing from genetic disease. They were a stable, self-sustaining population. Which brings us back to the central mystery. If genetics didn't kill them, what did? The answer has to be something sudden, something catastrophic, something that struck without warning. And that's where things get really interesting.
So let's examine the possible explanations. Theory 1. Extreme weather. Some scientists suggest an icing event, where rain falls on snow and freezes, creating an impenetrable ice layer that prevents animals from reaching vegetation. This can kill large numbers of herbivores, but would it kill every single mammoth on an island? Unlikely. Mammoths were Ice Age survivors, adapted to the harshest conditions imaginable. A few days of ice coverage wouldn't eliminate a population that survived 6,000 Arctic winters. Theory 2. Disease outbreak. Possible,
But again, we'd expect survivors with natural immunity. Diseases that kill 100% of a population are virtually unknown in nature. Theory 3. Humans arrived and hunted them to extinction. But the archaeology doesn't support this. Humans showed up centuries after the mammoths were gone. Theory 4. Volcanic activity or earthquake. Wrangel Island has no active volcanoes and no evidence of catastrophic geological activity during that period. Theory 5. Meteor impact. No impact crater, no geological evidence, no ash layers in the sediment. Every conventional explanation fails under scrutiny. So what are we left with? Here's where we need to zoom out and look at the bigger picture. The extinction of the Wrangel mammoths didn't happen in isolation. Around the same time period, give or take a few centuries, we see a pattern of mysterious disappearances across the northern hemisphere. Ancient civilizations report strange climate anomalies. Tree data shows unusual growth patterns. Ice cores reveal atmospheric disturbances. Something was happening to the planet's climate and environment around 4,000 years ago. Something that's not fully explained by conventional climatology. Now, I'm not saying there was a global catastrophe. The evidence doesn't support that. But there may have been a series of regional events, possibly connected, that we don't fully understand yet. The Wrangel mammoths might have been victims of something larger. And here's the really unsettling part. If we can't figure out what killed the last mammoths, how can we be sure it won't happen again? How can we protect modern endangered species from a threat we don't even understand? The questions multiply the deeper we dig.
Now let's talk about something that doesn't get enough attention in mainstream scientific discussions. There are reports, unconfirmed but intriguing, of mammoth remains found in contexts that suggest even more recent survival. Russian hunters and indigenous peoples of Siberia have long spoken of finding mammoth carcasses that seemed too fresh to be thousands of years old. Some of these reports date to the 1800s, when Western explorers first penetrated deep into Arctic Siberia. Were these simply well-preserved ancient specimens? Or could isolated pockets of mammoths have survived even longer than Wrangel Island? The scientific establishment dismisses these accounts as folklore or misidentification. But consider this. Wrangel Island itself wasn't discovered by Western science until 1867. Its mammoths were unknown to science for most of human history. What if there are other remote Arctic locations where megafauna survived even longer? What if the 2000 BC date is just the last confirmed population, not necessarily the absolute end? We may never know, because much of the Arctic remains unexplored even today. The permafrost holds secrets that have yet to be uncovered.
The Wrangel Island mammoth mystery isn't just an academic curiosity. It has direct implications for modern conservation efforts. We're currently watching numerous species approach extinction. Rhinos, elephants, various whale species, countless others. Conservation biologists use what they think they know about past extinctions to inform their strategies. But what if those assumptions are wrong? What if there are extinction mechanisms we don't understand? The mammoths survived the end of the Ice Age. They survived climate change. They survived being cut off from the mainland. They maintained a stable population for 6 millennia. By every measure we use to assess endangered species today, they should still be here. Yet they're not. This suggests there might be factors in extinction events that our models don't account for. Sudden, unpredictable catastrophes that strike without warning and leave no survivors. If we can't explain what happened on Wrangel Island, how confident can we be in our ability to prevent similar extinctions today? It's a sobering thought that challenges the very foundation of conservation biology.
There's one theory that mainstream science reluctantly acknowledges but doesn't like to emphasize: cosmic events. Around 12,900 years ago, something happened that nearly wiped out mammoths worldwide, the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. Evidence suggests multiple meteor or comet fragments struck North America, triggering rapid climate change and mass extinctions. Could something similar have happened on a smaller scale, around 2000 BC? Not a global catastrophe, but a regional airburst or impact in the Arctic. There's actually some intriguing evidence. The period around 2000 BC shows anomalies in atmospheric composition recorded in ice cores. There are accounts from ancient civilizations of unusual celestial phenomena. Some researchers have proposed that a comet fragment could have exploded in the atmosphere over the Arctic, creating a shockwave and heat pulse that killed everything in a vast radius. Such an event wouldn't necessarily leave an obvious crater, especially if it occurred over the ocean. The mammoths would have died instantly, which would explain the complete absence of survivors and the abrupt end in the fossil record.
But here's the problem. Suggesting cosmic catastrophes as extinction mechanisms makes you unpopular in academic circles. Scientists prefer gradual, predictable explanations. Climate change, habitat loss, human hunting. These are comfortable theories that fit neatly into our understanding of how the world works. Sudden, unpredictable disasters from space? That challenges the gradualist paradigm that's dominated paleontology for decades. Yet the evidence keeps piling up. The Younger Dryas impact theory was mocked when first proposed, but is now gaining mainstream acceptance. Similar impact events have been linked to other mass extinctions throughout Earth's history. We know these things happen. We know they've caused extinctions before. So why the resistance to considering it for the Wrangel Mammoths? Perhaps because it opens a door to uncomfortable questions. If a cosmic event wiped out the last mammoths without warning, what's to stop it from happening again? What if megafauna extinction across the planet wasn't primarily due to human activity, but to a series of cosmic impacts that we've simply failed to identify? These questions undermine decades of accepted theory, which is why they're not popular.
Let's consider another disturbing angle: the human population in 2000 BC. Historical estimates suggest there were only about 50 to 100 million humans on the entire planet at that time. That's less than the current population of many single countries today. Most humans were clustered in a few regions: Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Indus Valley, China. The Arctic was virtually unpopulated. Wrangel Island was one of the most remote, inaccessible places on Earth. The odds of humans encountering those mammoths, let alone hunting them to complete extinction, are incredibly low. Yet, that's what we're asked to believe. Some archaeologists point to evidence of human presence on the island dating to 3,600 years ago, and suggest the mammoths might have lasted until then. But even that doesn't solve the problem. A handful of Stone Age hunters arriving on an island couldn't systematically hunt down every single mammoth without any surviving. It's logistically impossible. Unless the mammoth population was already on the brink of collapse when humans arrived, human predation alone cannot explain the total extinction. The numbers simply don't add up. Recent research has uncovered another possible factor: water quality. Scientists analyzing the geology of Wrangel Island discovered that weathering of the local bedrock could have released toxic elements into the drinking water supply. Elephants, and presumably mammoths, require massive amounts of water daily. If their freshwater sources became contaminated with harmful minerals or heavy metals, it could have had devastating effects on their health. But here's the catch: this would have been a gradual process, not a sudden one. Chemical contamination would weaken the population over time, affecting reproduction, causing health issues, and ultimately leading to decline. Yet, the fossil record shows no such decline. The mammoths were there, apparently healthy, and then they weren't. Moreover, if water quality was the issue, we'd expect to see it reflected in their bones. Toxins leave chemical signatures in bone tissue. While some researchers are investigating this angle, so far there's no definitive evidence of widespread poisoning. The water quality hypothesis might be part of the story, but it can't be the whole explanation for such an abrupt, complete extinction.
So, let's synthesize what we know. The Wrangel Island mammoths survived in isolation for 6,000 years. They maintained a stable, genetically viable population. They showed no signs of environmental stress or nutritional deficiency. Then, around 2000 BC, every single one of them died in what appears to be a very short time period. The conventional explanations, disease, climate, genetics, human hunting all fail to adequately account for the completeness and suddenness of the extinction. The unconventional explanations, cosmic impact, unknown catastrophe, lack direct evidence but better match the pattern we see in the fossil record. This is the mystery at the heart of the Wrangel Island extinction. We have all this data, all these bones, all this genetic information, and yet we still can't definitively say what killed the last mammoths. That alone should tell us something important. There are forces in nature we don't fully understand. There are extinction mechanisms that can strike without warning and leave almost no trace. The last mammoths died keeping their secret, and that secret challenges everything we think we know about how species disappear.
Here's what mainstream education doesn't emphasize. The timeline of mammoth extinction completely shatters the simple narrative you learned in school. You were probably taught that mammoths died out at the end of the Ice Age, roughly 10,000 years ago, victims of climate change and human hunting. Case closed. But that's not the full story. That's not even close to the full story. Mammoths survived in multiple locations long after the supposed extinction date. Wrangel Island until 2000 BC, St. Paul Island until 5,600 years ago, possibly other locations we haven't discovered yet. This means the extinction of mammoths wasn't a single event, but a series of regional disappearances happening at different times for potentially different reasons. It means the story is far more complex than the simplified version presented in textbooks. And it means we need to ask why this complexity is downplayed. Is it simply that nuance doesn't fit into a brief lesson plan? Or is there resistance to challenging the established extinction narrative? Either way, the full truth about mammoth extinction is far stranger and more mysterious than what you've been told. The Wrangel Island mammoth mystery forces us to confront some uncomfortable philosophical questions. We like to think that we understand extinction. We like to believe that if we just preserve habitat, control hunting, and manage endangered species carefully, we can prevent extinctions. The mammoths had all of that. They had pristine habitat, no hunting pressure for 6,000 years, no human interference, and they still went extinct. Completely, suddenly, without apparent reason. What does that say about our ability to protect species today? What does it say about the predictability of extinction events? Perhaps it tells us that nature is far more chaotic, far more unpredictable than we're comfortable admitting. Perhaps it tells us that there are extinction threats we haven't even identified yet, lurking in the shadows of our ignorance. The last mammoths died in isolation on a frozen island, but their extinction echoes forward through time, challenging our assumptions about how the natural world works. It's a reminder that for all our scientific advancement, there are still fundamental questions about life on Earth that we cannot answer. So here's the truth. We don't know what killed the last mammoths. We may never know. The evidence has been erased by 4,000 years of Arctic weather. The witnesses are extinct. The crime scene is frozen beneath permafrost. But what we do know is deeply unsettling. We know that a viable, stable population of large animals can vanish without warning. We know that our extinction models are incomplete. We know that there are mechanisms of mass death that operate beyond our current understanding. And we know that mainstream science is uncomfortable discussing these possibilities because they undermine decades of accepted theory. The Wrangel Island mammoths survived the end of the Ice Age. They survived climate change. They survived 6,000 years of isolation. They shouldn't have gone extinct. By every measure we use to assess population viability, they should still be here. But they're not. And that impossibility is the real mystery. That's what mainstream education doesn't want you thinking about too deeply. Because if we can't explain what happened to the mammoths, how many other things about extinction might we be wrong about?
In 2024, scientists made yet another discovery that adds to the mystery. Using advanced DNA sequencing, they found that the Wrangel mammoths had lost several genes related to immune function. This genetic erosion happened gradually over their 6,000 years of isolation. Some researchers jumped on this as the answer. Weakened immunity made them vulnerable to disease. But others pointed out a crucial flaw. If disease was the culprit, why no evidence of it in the bones? Why no gradual decline? Why complete extinction rather than a population crash with survivors? The genetic data raises more questions than it answers. Yes, the mammoths were losing some genetic diversity, but they were also purging harmful mutations. The population was stable for millennia despite these genetic changes. So did the loss of immune genes make them vulnerable to something? Or is this just another piece of a puzzle we still can't solve? The more we learn about the Wrangel mammoths, the more mysterious their extinction becomes. Every new study seems to deepen the enigma rather than resolve it.
The parallels between the Wrangel mammoths and modern endangered species are striking and terrifying. Consider the northern white rhino, down to just 2 females, unable to reproduce naturally, essentially extinct. Or the vaquita porpoise, fewer than 10 individuals left in the wild. These species, like the Wrangel mammoths, are isolated populations clinging to existence. We're trying everything we can to save them. Protected reserves, anti-poaching patrols, breeding programs. But what if there are threats we haven't considered? What if something sudden and catastrophic, like whatever killed the mammoths, strikes without warning? The Wrangel mammoths teach us that survival isn't just about population numbers and genetic diversity. It's not just about having protected habitat and eliminating human threats. There are forces in nature, perhaps cosmic, perhaps climatic, perhaps something we haven't even identified, that can end a species regardless of how well we think we're protecting it. That's a sobering lesson for conservationists. It suggests that no matter how much we do, we might not be able to prevent the next extinction.
You might be wondering, if this mystery is so profound, why isn't it bigger news? Why isn't every scientist talking about it? The answer is uncomfortable but revealing. Academic careers are built on explaining things, not on admitting ignorance. A scientist who says, "We don't know and might never know," doesn't get research grants as easily as one who proposes a testable hypothesis. So there's institutional pressure to present confident explanations, even when the evidence doesn't fully support them. Additionally, the mammoth extinction narrative has been simplified for public consumption. Climate change killed them. That's the story most people know, and it's a useful story for discussing modern climate issues. Complicating that narrative with mysterious Arctic extinctions and unexplained population collapses doesn't serve the broader educational agenda. So the Wrangel Island mystery gets downplayed, relegated to specialist journals and academic debates, while the public continues to believe the simplified version. It's not necessarily a conspiracy, it's just how scientific communication works. But the effect is the same. The full, strange truth remains hidden from most people.
The last mammoth on Wrangel Island died approximately 4,000 years ago. Imagine that final moment. Was it sudden? A cosmic impact? A catastrophic storm? Or gradual? The last survivor of a dwindling population dying alone on a frozen shore? We'll never know, but that unknown haunts us because it represents a fundamental gap in our understanding of life on Earth. These were massive, intelligent animals, survivors of the Ice Age, adapted to the harshest environments. If they could vanish without explanation, what's to stop other species from doing the same? What's to stop us? The Wrangel mammoth extinction is a mirror held up to our modern world. It shows us that for all our technology, all our science, all our confidence, we're still vulnerable to forces we don't understand. The mammoths had no predators, no habitat loss, no human interference for 6,000 years, and they still went extinct. Let that sink in. The evidence is right in front of us. The bones don't lie. The timeline is clear, but the explanation remains frustratingly out of reach. And maybe that's the real lesson: humility in the face of nature's complexity. This investigation is just beginning,
The Wrangel mammoth extinction is one piece of a much larger puzzle, a puzzle involving mysterious disappearances, unexplained timelines, and questions that mainstream science doesn't want to answer. If this video has opened your eyes to how much we don't know about Earth's history, then subscribe to this channel. We're going to dig deeper into these mysteries. We're going to challenge the official narratives. We're going to ask the uncomfortable questions that need to be asked. Comment below with your theories. What do you think killed the last mammoths? Was it a cosmic event? An unknown disease? Something even stranger? Your perspective matters because these are questions science hasn't definitively answered. And hit that like button if you believe that the truth about extinction is more complex than what we've been taught. Share this video with anyone who thinks they know the whole story about mammoths, because they don't. The bones are still there on Wrangel Island, frozen in time, keeping their secrets. But we're going to keep investigating until we uncover the truth. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the unknown. The mystery continues.